Very exciting to be here with you because I think lasers are about innovation. And if we've ever had an era in the United States and maybe worldwide that the world needed innovation, it's now. Just look at the economy and everybody's searching for answers. I've never seen the world in more upheaval economically, trying to figure out what to do. Unfortunately, we don't have one single new technology like the internet that can take the whole world forward and pull us out of this economic time. But innovation is the key to all businesses' future. And businesses that don't innovate are left behind. Dentistry had many years where that wasn't a problem. In my grandfather's era, there were 5 or 6 services and techniques that we did over and over and over. There was no competition. Dentists liked each other. My grandfather used to tell me in his 3rd year in practice, he already had a 1-year waiting list for new patients. We don't see that today. And when a new dentist would open in Baltimore, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, a new dentist would open, the dentist would get together and send patients to the new dentist to help the new dentist get busy. Today, we get together, we hire an assassin and send that person over. It's very, very different out there now. My father saw the best of dentistry up until about the 1980s, and in the 1980s, we started to hear about closed panel insurance, and Sterling Optical was going to open franchises all over the country. And by the way, dental overhead became the issue. We were opening in malls and making fancier offices. But in the early 80s, we still didn't have the technologies that we have today. Well, fast forward to 2010. You know, this is not 1980 or 1950 or 1930 anymore. We have phenomenal options. We have incredible innovation. And the technology, I believe, has far outpaced our doctor ability to understand exactly what to do with it. And I don't mean clinically. When I stand in front of you, I know I'm in front of some of the best clinicians probably in the world. I mean, some of the best in the world. And yet, we have technologies, and when you have 1,200 doctors a year enrolling in your consulting programs, in our specialty divisions, in our general practice division, you begin to see, and many say to me, well, I'm a very advanced dentist, but advanced dentist means clinically. I believe that 98% of most dentist careers are focused on clinical excellence. Let's take more CE, let's go to more courses. I mean, I came into dentistry before veneers. I started 3 months after I graduated. I saw the first light-cured composite in my life. So I had a 4-year phenomenal education at University of Maryland School of Dentistry. It was a great school. I graduated, and 90 days later, half my education went out the window. And composite dentistry was the greatest thing at that point that had ever come along because we could do white things in the front of the mouth. It wasn't even about making pretty back teeth. We could do pretty front teeth, which was nice. And we were hand bonding, and then veneers came, and we ran to veneer courses. And I met dentists. I was very involved with the Academy of General Dentistry and Pankey and different places, and I met dentists who would say to me with pride, I've taken 50 courses on veneers. And I would say to myself, wow, how many ways are there to prep a veneer? I mean, how many ways can you take a 0.5 millimeter of enamel off the front of a tooth? I mean, after the first 25 courses, what did they teach you next? To use a denture burr and a high speed? I mean, what's the next trick to do this? So we are so clinically focused as doctors. And by the way, quality is paramount. I am one of you. I am a dentist. I was 10 years full-time, kept a hand in part-time. And I have to tell you, quality is paramount. But what I say to my audience is, your number one responsibility is excellence in clinical care. But I'm a business lecturer. I am the other side. So when these clients come in and they say, I need to tell you, I'm a very advanced doctor. We hear this all the time. I have a very advanced practice. Or I get invited to speak at a study club, and the study club host will call me and say, Roger, bring your best stuff because this is a very advanced study club. I've come to realize what that really means is clinically. You are all, most of you in this room are clinically superior. That's why you're sitting here at a laser conference. You've taken endless courses and endless study, and I will address that a little later in a slightly different way. But have we incorporated technology into the business side of our practice? Do we understand return on investment? Do we understand branding and messaging? What message do we want to get to our patients? How are we going to get it? We need to learn the practice management of dental lasers. I personally think, and I'll give you a thesis that you can think about during the day, but I personally believe that the era of the laser dental practice is coming to a close. Now here, listen carefully. The era of the laser dental practice, where we have practices that are built and marketed on being laser-only practices. And from all the research we did, we are entering the era of dental practices that have lasers. That's a very, very different concept. You know, when I look at something like this, if I was asked to come out here and speak to an elite group of a very niche group of laser users, and we don't want the rest of dentistry to be involved with this, and we don't want the rest of dentistry to buy lasers, it's only for this special group, I can give that lecture. But because we had the chance to do all this research and analysis and understand who had lasers, what were they doing with them, how could they be successful, how could they be more successful, how can we grow practices 30 to 50% that, as our clients tend to do in about 1 to 3 years, where does all this fit together? I came out on the side of we need to see lasers in many, many practices, not laser practices, but lasers as part of dentistry, a bigger, growing, vibrant part. Because I've always been a believer that a rising tide floats all boats. In other words, the more we all do, the better this profession's going to be, and the better your practice will be. So we're going to look at trends in dental lasers, improving practice productivity, and the patient experience with BIOLASE. I am excited that perhaps Levin Group, the company I founded, may have a chance to help with the trends in dental lasers, to help move and stimulate the trends in dental lasers. So, our 3 objectives today are to incorporate lasers easily into the practice. At Levin Group, we change practices. We overhaul practices. We're better than we've ever been. Why? Because we had to be. 2 years ago, the U.S. economy basically crashed. Okay, we're not in a depression. In fact, I went back and I reread when they were talking early on about us going into a depression. I pulled out my old copy of John Kenneth Galbraith's book, The Economist, The Crash of 1929. And by the time I finished that book, I knew one thing. We weren't going into a depression. We don't look anything like a depression. This country is healthy as can be. Most countries are. Right now, Greece has some problems, and Portugal and Spain. But we're not where we were 2 years ago. We're pretty darn strong. And dentistry can be very strong. Anything where we've declined in dentistry is because we let it happen. If your practice is down right now, it's because you didn't do anything new. 2 years ago, we overhauled our consulting programs, brought at least 200 new concepts or revised concepts in, and I'll give you the confidence that what I'm saying today will work. 99% of 1,200 doctors last year had growth, which is phenomenal. We're better. They're paying more attention. It used to be 98.1. Everybody wants to know how to be successful, which is my goal today. But one thing I understand very well. I was a doctor, so in practicing and running a consulting firm, the one thing I understand is you've got to make it easy and you've got to make it simple. Complicated doesn't work in dentistry. Why? Not because you don't have high IQs. You've got extremely high IQs. It's because we are so busy that if we can't do things easily, we get overwhelmed. One of my biggest goals for the next 20 years of my career is to stop the overwhelmed feeling that doctors have and make things simple and easy. It is not hard to grow a practice. You just have to do the right things. That's the whole key. Number 2, improve the patient experience. I believe firmly that one fundamental change in the United States and Europe and maybe worldwide is people want more value for their money. And lasers, there's just the word laser connotes value. How we explain it, what we tell them, but don't overwhelm them either. We'll get into a lot of detail here. Increase laser case acceptance and grow practice production. I don't give a lecture unless I'm speaking to the Dental Trade Alliance, which are the companies where my focus isn't on increasing production. Our number 1 mission at Levin Group is to increase practice production easily and simply for doctors in a low-stress, high satisfaction environment. If that is my number 1 mission. That is our elevator speech. If somebody says to me, what do? We increase practice production simply and easily for doctors in a low-stress environment with high satisfaction. Lasers are fun. That's one of the first things I realized in looking at it. They're fun. Patients love the idea of lasers. Why? Because it solves things that scare them, and it solves time problems. Okay, real quickly, we're not going to be doing this today, but just so you get a sense of who we are, in the first year of our programs, we're systems-based consultants. Consulting is about systems, getting systems into practices. That's another problem with lasers. You go out, you buy a laser, you start using it, you become clinically very competent and adept, but where does it fit in to the systems? And I'm going to give you a number of points today that you can use to begin to fit these lasers into your system. So without going through these, we have 9 systems that we put in place in the first year of a client. They're rather easy to go in because what they are is we take the systems you have and we just replace and upgrade them with new systems that work together, which creates what we call a Levin practice. And lasers fit into this beautifully because the goal for every dentist on the planet is to have continually increasing production, continually increasing profit, continually increasing referrals. Well, lasers play a major role here, as I'm going to discuss. But we want to do it in a low-stress environment with high professional satisfaction, ultimately leading to your financial independence. Why is number 6 there? Because you own a business. And, you know, I had a dentist that called me about 3 weeks ago. He said, Roger, I'm going to be retiring in the next 5 years. I understand you have a 5-year program for people who want to retire, but I don't know if I should do it. I said, well, tell me about your practice. And he has a nice practice. I also happen to know the statistic from our lawyers who do all the transitions that 60% of general dentists kill 40% of the value of their practice in the last 5 years. It's amazing how we just get lazier, we don't want to do as much, we don't invest, we don't buy things, and then we don't understand why the sale value is so much less than expected. In fact, sometimes you end up working a couple more years because you can't afford to retire at that point. So he said, well, the reason I don't think I should do it is I went to this seminar, and the guy said, don't worry about selling your practice, practice 3 more years and just close the doors. And I have to tell you, I don't know, I didn't even ask him who said it, I don't want to know. It was one of the most idiotic thoughts I've ever heard. You spend 30 years or so building a business, and then you're going to just shut the doors because you didn't bother to plan the exit strategy? Well, that's why financial independence is important. So your practice has a value. The better you build it, not only will you do well now, you'll do well later when the time comes. Okay. The top 5 challenges facing general dentists today. This is not my opinion. This is based on survey research. Levin Group is a data-driven company that builds business systems. So all the systems we build, what you're going to get today, are based on data. We've got 15,000 parts of data from our alumni, 1,200 more from current clients. We do the dental economics Levin Group annual practice survey every year. That's another 3,000 offices of data. And in this case, we got to do a significant BIOLASE laser survey to determine what's really going on out there. Well, the top 5 challenges facing GPs today are, number 1, decreased production. In the first year of the recession, and by the way, in terms of the recession, you've got to begin to ignore it. You have to say to yourself, I am not participating. I mean, write that down. I am not participating. I mean, I'm not kidding about this. If you listen to talk shows and you read the paper, you start to feel like you have to be like everybody else. Our clients are growing. You can grow, but not by listening to everybody who's got gloom and doom stories out there. By the way, it says GPs. I suspect this is specialists as well. Some of you in the room are doing great. Many of you are flat. Some of you may be down a little bit. Lasers are part of the solution. They're not the whole solution. They're part of the solution. More patients postponing treatment. We're seeing that. We've seen more people putting off treatment over the last couple years. They tell you they're going to get back in 6 months. They don't, and you don't have the systems to get them back. One of the principles that we build our systems around at Levin Group, you can write this down, 98% of your patients should be scheduled at all times. You know, we talk about laser dentistry or dental lasers. If the patients aren't coming in, it doesn't matter what you've got. You could have a ray gun. It wouldn't make any difference. There's no one to do it with. Number 3, more single tooth versus comprehensive treatment. Here we are in maybe dentistry's most interesting era. I don't buy into we were in the golden age, now we're in the platinum age. Any practice can be in any age it wants. You want to be in the platinum age? Go build a platinum age practice. Don't wait for it to just come to you. Dentistry has been very guilty of wait. You know, if the economy's good, we do well. If it's not, we don't. We sit back and we are really victims of what's going on out there with enough patience to make sure that we can afford our lifestyles along the way. But in reality, single-tooth treatment is still the majority. 81% of all general practice appointments are single-tooth treatment. Do the math. We build new schedules for clients literally every weekday of the year. Every weekday, somebody is having a new schedule built, or maybe several. And we know the scheduling numbers inside and out. We know the statistics inside and out. If 81% of general practice appointments are single-tooth treatment, that tells you right here what the production limit is, what the profit limit is. I can even tell you how many years that doctor's going to have to work, minus portfolio declines from 2 years ago. I mean, because I did all this with Robert Graham, a brilliant certified financial planner, ran all these numbers. We know the average dentist, at least in the United States, will now work an extra 8 to 10 years before they're going to be able to retire. You don't know that yet, but we know that. And the reason is we look at these statistics. If 81% of appointments are single-tooth treatment, then what does that tell us? It tells us the limitations of that practice. Now, I don't know what the number should be, but I know 81% is way too high. Our typical client, you can make a note, is dropping that down to around 55%. And that's a huge change. Lasers increase the amount of comprehensive treatment you'll be able to do and the level of case acceptance. And again, I'll get moving faster in a little bit, and you'll get all this. Number 4, more no-shows and cancellations. People are dropping out of appointments. By the way, a last-minute cancellation, don't kid yourself, it's a no-show. If they're not coming in, they're not coming in. It doesn't matter whether they call you an hour in advance or not. At Levin Group, our target is 1%. No more than 1% of patients should be no-shows or last-minute cancels. You have to manage that. It's very frustrating. Also, we see a lot of practices, believe it or not, that will lose 1 to 2 years of production for every 20 years they're in practice because of no-shows and last-minute cancellations. It's unbelievable, but this is mathematics, not opinions. These are facts that I'm giving you. And number 5, fewer patient referrals. Patients are not referring as much. A number of new patients were down statistically in many practices by a third or more. We weren't maximizing the average production per new patient to begin with. We lose a third. Now our practices suffer. We get to practice longer. So these are the top 5 challenges that we saw today. For the specialists in the room, one of yours is fewer referring doctor referrals. More general dentists are tending to keep more in-house. They're taking out, we have all the numbers. They're taking out more single teeth. They are doing more endo. They are referring less perio. Kenny, what's interesting is that they're not necessarily treating it. They're just not referring it. That's the amazing thing. And the 4th thing is they are cutting overhead. And since they don't know what that means we will buy less more often, which is an interesting approach to cutting overhead. Okay. Now, in 2009, here's what happened in the dental economy. Number 1, production nationally decreased by approximately 11.6%. Monthly production dropped on average by $16,497. You know what's amazing here? We can make that up by properly implementing lasers into the practice. Stop being a laser practice and start being a practice with lasers. Stop thinking a laser is the magic trick to, you buy a laser, production goes through the roof. You know, it doesn't work that way. You actually have to take it out of the box to get the production up. And what I'm saying is if you stop thinking, I'll promote laser practice, and you start implementing laser into best model systems, your production's going through the roof. That's the big difference here, is people think, well, I'll just buy a laser and production goes way up. We didn't see that at all. What we saw are a lot of people who bought things that didn't get the return on investment, but if you incorporate it into the systems properly, it's unbelievable what you can accomplish. No-shows were up in 52% of practices. High or extremely high stress levels reported by 1 in 3 dentists. I haven't had anybody tell me that dentists have the highest suicide rate since I was on an airplane yesterday. Hi, what do you do? I run a dental management consulting firm. Did you know dentists have the highest suicide rate? I mean, it's like, no, I've never heard that before. By the way, the next time somebody says that to you, just look back and go, where did you hear that? Could you give me the research citation on that? You know, it's amazing. Decrease in percentage of fees collected reported by 37% of practices. We're in a recession. Do you want to wait it out? Because, by the way, my belief, you got 5 to 7 years of waiting, and that doesn't even include your taxes going up next year in this country, and they are going up. So understand it's going to get harder, not easier, to build income, to build financial independence. What I say to young dentists is, let's pretend you've been in practice now for 40 years. Let's look back 40 years and ask the question, what should you have been doing to get to where you want to be? Instead, we go into practice, we hang a shingle, we got a ton of debt, we buy all kinds of stuff, and then we just go through our career and hope everything works out. And that used to work very well. As a friend of mine said, hope is a wasted emotion. We have to do something. So let's start with a quick overview of analyzing your production. The goal here is to determine the practice's production potential. Here's what I do know. If you're involved with lasers, you have a higher production potential. Not just because you bought it and opened up the box. You've got to begin to implement it. I'm going to give you a lot of ideas in about 20 minutes, starting about 20 minutes. You've got to begin to implement it, but lasers are a wonderful opportunity to grow production, but not just because you got one. It's not like a manufacturing plant. We get a faster machine and everybody makes more money. I mean, if Toyota right now can make more Toyotas, are they going to sell more Toyotas? The answer today is no. They were a fantastic company. They will be, again, a fantastic company. General Motors, went into bankruptcy. And if they get faster equipment and better processes, are they going to sell more cars? And the answer was no, except right now in their competition with Toyota, they're going to do a little better because of what happened. So the point is, buying a laser alone doesn't grow production. It's what you do with it once you get it. And if this sounds like common sense, it isn't, because many people that we talk to had them, but we're not maximizing the opportunity. What I love to talk about, and by the way, in terms of technology, this slide comes from a fellow named Andy Grove, who founded the company Intel, came here as a penniless immigrant to the United States, founded one of the best chip companies in the world. And Andy Grove, when I heard him speak, talked about this concept called the inflection point. An inflection point is a point where things change. And anytime a business or industry faces change, it faces an inflection point. What's the #1 inflection point in dentistry today? The economy. Whatever you were doing 2 years ago, the economy changed. Things are not easier, they're harder. Even if you're doing better, things aren't easier, they're still harder. So when an inflection point occurs and you've had growth up until that point, you're either going to flatten out or you're going to begin to decline. In dentistry, when you hit an inflection point, there is only one solution. And it's not just buying stuff, it is creating new systems. So when I look at the iLase, it is an amazing product. Whoever thought you could walk around with a laser in your pocket, other than the one that I'm holding, because I have my own laser here. Whoever thought you could run around with a laser in your pocket? You could pick it up in your hand, go room to room. Most new technologies come out. They're the size of refrigerators when you first start. And then miniaturization is part of the process. But the iLase, EasyLase, Waterlase, what you want to have, write this phrase down, because here's a phrase that I've made up. You want a suite of lasers, S-U-I-T-E. You want to have a suite of lasers, which are tools for different procedures in the practice. What we can do today to help patients is amazing, and most dentists still don't understand the capability of lasers. You do, but a lot of your colleagues don't. Well, for you all, to try to make this as relevant as possible, the time has come to say, okay, I've got a laser, I've got a suite of lasers, and now I'm going to maximize my return on investment, give the best care I can to my patients, and the way I'm going to do that is by realizing that the systems I had don't work anymore. First of all, before you got a laser, the systems you had then don't work with lasers. Secondly, the economy changed. I had a new client that joined us in December. He said, I changed my whole practice 2 years ago, but I realized I've got to do it again now. Whatever we were doing 2 years ago is not good enough today. The world has begun to change. So the inflection point is where your practice production begins to plateau or decline. It's where systems have been outgrown, and inflection point is the only way to grow. And add the words, by changing your systems, okay? By changing your systems. And that's what you do at an inflection point. When systems are outgrown, production flattens out. You may have lasers, but if you don't change your systems to make them more effective, you'll still have a practice that flattens out. The doctor then cannot stretch any farther. We've pushed doctors as hard as we can. There are a lot of depressed doctors out there right now. I hear from them all the time. And I say to them, well, what are you doing about it? The solution to depression is action. What are you doing about it? Well, the economy's bad. Well, decide you're not participating. Okay, but they're going to raise taxes. Gee, nobody cares about your opinion. Nobody's calling you. So whatever it is, get over it. And what are we going to do for your practice? So the inflection point is defined by 4% growth or less. If you're not growing annually by more than 4%, you've probably hit an inflection point, which is fine if you have. And then there are people who are growing and growing. I call them lifetime learners. I love them, and they want to grow more. And it's not even about the money. It's the excitement. It's the challenge. It's the learning that they love. So before the recession, there were 3 natural career plateaus: 5-year, 9 to 10-year, and 15 to 17-year. In a down economy, plateaus come sooner and stay longer. So one of the questions you should ask yourself this morning is, how long do I want to be in a plateau if you are indeed in one? Now, this slide is called the practice career cycle. There are 4 stages that Levin Group has identified in a practice: start, growth, maturity, and decline. Some of you bought lasers because you hit maturity. You were flattening out, and you thought, well, I'll buy a laser, and that'll just catapult me back to more production. When in fact, by the way, it's a fantastic tool to increase production if we get new systems in place. This 65% is now incorrect. 75% of U.S. practices last year were either flat or they were on the right side of the curve or in decline. The good thing about most practices I see in decline, it's easy to reverse, it's easy to get out of, but not by doing more of the same thing. As Einstein once said, you can't solve the problem by doing more of what got you into the problem to begin with. What I see in a lot of practices is when things aren't going the way they want, they just try harder doing the things that didn't get them to where they wanted to go. It's time for change. It's time for innovation. So if you grew by less than 4% last year, you're in what we call early decline. It's no big deal. Here's the good news. It's easy to get out of. It's simple and it's easy, but we need to do some new things. It's all about systems, and that's where we want to go. Okay, so having said that, systems increase production, which increases income, which fills in portfolios. That is my 4-step process that I would like to help every doctor on the planet with, because this is what we need. And if you do these things, incorporating lasers, using them properly, building new systems, what can you accomplish? Well, these are facts. These are not opinions. You can increase your practice 20-year revenue for the next 20 years by $6 to $8 million. If you've only got 10 years to go, it prorates at $3 to $4 million in revenue. You can reach financial independence 8 years earlier. As a client said to me recently, I have wonderful retirement planning and no plan to retire. He wants to work till he drops. That's fantastic. But be financially independent along the way. The good news is that almost every practice we see, and that's 1,200 doctors a year, has a 30 to 50% growth potential, and there are people in this room who've done it with us, a 30 to 50% growth potential. So when you're sitting there, feel good. Just know that you've got to make some changes, and they're not as hard as you think. Okay, so let's start talking about lasers, all right? The laser advantage. I think lasers give you a tremendous advantage. Obviously, there's a clinical advantage. Where we come in is, okay, now you're clinically adept, but taking the next clinical course and the next and the next and the next, while you need to keep up and you need to learn, is not going to be the total solution. You need to get the business side, the implementation side of lasers in place.